Warning! Warning! This podcast contains spoilers.
Listen at your own risk.
Welcome to Medium Shift, the podcast that investigates how stories stack up from medium to medium through the adaptation process.
Happy 50th episode. That's right, we've been doing this shit for too long now? Too long.
Too long.
Anyway, we are going back to our roots, I guess, for the next 3 episodes, looking at media related to and essentially adapted from the same things our initial episodes were adapted from, starting with our complement to The Dark Knight with Batman, Mask of the Phantasm.
Welcome to Medium Shift. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ev.
And it is true, we are doing a blast from the past, kind of, in some ways, for the next 3 episodes, as we revisit or do something related to the first 3 episodes we did of the podcast, which at the time, Dark Knight,
Kong Skull Island,
and Mad Max the Game. Starting off with Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, which I'm gonna blow my load straight up top. I think this is the best Batman movie ever made, but we can debate that, I guess. So, Ev, now that I've set up those massive expectations, what do you think of Batman Mask of the Phantasm?
I mean, do people really want to hear my opinion? I mean, you ended the last episode with that same quote and left people hanging for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I feel my opinion is a bit of a letdown, but I'll
No. I want to know your opinion. I don't actually know what you think of this movie, so let's start with that, and I will have plenty of time to ramble. Do not you worry.
Okay, so yeah, I did enjoy this movie. It felt like a continuation of classic Batman animated adventures, even though I still haven't actually properly seen the Batman the Animated Series in its full entirety.
Sacrilegious.
But I've seen enough animated Batman and animated everything else DC animated universe, including the Superman animated series and the Justice League stuff, that it feels like right at home with that sort of style. And yeah, no, I quite enjoyed it. It was a classic little Batman noir film. There was a detective case to be solved. I mean, let's be honest, it was pretty easy to figure it out quite early on.
Well, yeah, sure. Batman has never been... Well, look, he has a couple of amazing mystery stories, but for the most part, the who exactly is the Phantasm is not the meat of the movie. Like, it's... Why are they the Phantasm? I guess.
Even then, I kind of picked up on that.
Well, yeah, no, I'm more meaning thematically, but yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yes, thematically, it is really, really interesting, and I love how it tackles the whole Batman psychology behind all that, and gives you another classic sort of, what if Batman went slightly off the deep end? Is sort of a nice mirror to Batman, but for once it wasn't the Joker being the mirror.
Yeah.
So yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
Great. Yep. Good. No, I mean, I've already said it up front. I guess I love this movie. I think it is, even though the very first episode we did was on The Dark Knight, which is still kind of like my favorite movie ever because it is like close to my heart, like nostalgically in many ways. But I think like as an adaptation, I think it leaves a little bit to be desired as a Batman film, I guess, in some ways. But this, not only Batman Mask of the Phantasm, but more broadly Batman the Animated Series, like, it has a reputation for being like the definitive version of Batman outside of the comics for a reason. Like, I think everything about like the music and the gothic architecture and the tone and the noir elements and the aspects of Batman's psychology and just the way that, just the entire mood piece and the way that it depicts Batman, I think is just so incredibly perfect and spot on, and just feels like one of those things that just really understands like the synthesis of the character in so many ways that like more broadly I think that is true for both the animated series and Mask of the Phantasm, but I feel like Mask of the Phantasm is just kind of the epitome of that. Like, it is just essentially an incredible, really long episode of the series, but even more adult and violent, I guess. And just every, like, scene after scene while I was watching, I've seen this movie, like, you know, tons of times at this point, but just as I was going through, I'm reading through my notes now, and it's literally just me, like, commenting down every single fantastic quote from it. Like, I didn't count on being happy, and that whole scene when he's, like, holding on to, like, his parents' gravestone, the fact that his proposal to Andrea is interrupted by a bunch of bats from the Batcave is like, seems really silly on paper, but just works so incredibly well thematically, and the Dark Mirror with Andrea, and just that whole sequence, and the laugh when everything is blowing up around Joker, and he finally thinks like this might be the end, and makes just an incredible joke. I really think this movie barely does, for me as like a Batman fan, just barely takes a foot wrong, and I love it. Yeah, I think it's incredible.
How do you feel in the fact that what we essentially got in this movie as well was kind of a Joker origin?
A little bit. I mean, it's a footnote more than anything, I guess.
I mean, it's a pre-Joker Joker.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't necessarily see, like, the killing joke where he becomes the Joker and such. All it really reveals, essentially, that he was a mob enforcer previously. Yeah, look, I mean, I remember the first time I saw that, I'm like, I don't really like that, because I just don't necessarily like Joker having an origin. I feel like in this, it just performs, like, a plot, like, solution, essentially, and then it gets Andre to go after Joker and then fits him into the climax without revealing anything specifically. Like, it is not a Joker movie in the same way, like, The Dark Knight or Joker is, which, like, I can forgive that at the very least. Like, it's not like we're literally saying, oh, he's this failed stand-up comedian, we're doing this whole thing again, so... I don't know. It didn't necessarily take away from me, even if I do think that is a little bit... The fact that they even have to reveal some element of the Joker's backstory isn't ideal, but, you know, I think it's forgivable.
And I like the idea that Batman managed to pick that up just by drawing a red smile on the photo. Yeah. It's like, yep, that's all the proof I need. That's the Joker.
I mean, he has a very distinctive nose and face, yes. Especially in this animation style. Like, I love the look of this Joker, and, like, obviously Mark Hamill's voice is just spectacular as well. So, like, on one hand, yeah, that's kind of silly and comic booky, but on the other hand, within this universe, and when the Joker is, so distinctive and Batman is so obsessed with him, like, I don't know. I thought that was just a really, really funny moment that didn't necessarily take me out of it, but just fit really well.
Although part of me really wanted to see a storyline where Batman does that with a completely unrelated, like, birthday clown. And it's like, it's the Joker! And goes completely off the rails in his detective case, and everyone's just like, what? This was not part of the plan.
Oh, you clearly haven't read The Three Jokers yet, because that's exactly what that story is. Batman going around taking in birthday clowns. There's the 3 birthday clowns. They're all the Jokers. Yeah, not true. I haven't actually read it yet. But, like, I think... I've seen criticism of this movie necessarily that, like, Joker kind of feels shoehorned into the third act, but for me, personally at least, I think it works quite seamlessly, honestly. Like, just having him, the emotional crux and, like, the thematic parallel of the movie is still very much with the Phantasm, I feel, and Joker's essentially just icing on the cake, I think. And that whole sequence, like, the whole third act, I think, is just incredible. Like, the way that he's rigged everything around the world of tomorrow, the fact that that's just a kind of a decaying, essentially metaphor for Gotham, especially after Bruce and Andrea went to it when they were dating as well, I think is just incredible. As well as just all, like, the little, like, toys and planes and everything like that. And the fact that Joker's hiding in an inside bit of a tower, like, one of the things that the animated series, you're gonna hear me say this sentence a lot, but one of the things that the animated series gets so well is that Joker is funny. That's the thing. Like, that's a thing that's kind of been lost in a lot of his grim, dark versions, is that the Joker can make legitimately kind of hilarious or ridiculous jokes or just make light of weird circumstances in a way that is so twisted, but I enjoy so much. Like, I can't imagine as much as I love it, but I can't imagine the Heath Ledger Joker walking around with, like, a little skyscraper on his head, like, just peering at Batman through windows. It's a perfect kind of synthesis between campy, like, Silver Age Joker while still being a horrifying psychopath. So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I can't really see Joaquin Phoenix just walking around with a Jetsons-inspired robotic mannequin.
No, sadly not. I really feel like Joker's a whole other case, but yeah, I think that's not necessarily Joaquin Phoenix's speed. And, like, to me, Mark Hamill's voice is always going to be, like, as much as I love Heath Ledger's version of the Joker, that is a version of the Joker. Like, where, like, Mark Hamill, if I had to point to the version of the Joker, like, this is the one. Yeah, absolutely, so...
It certainly helps that he's the other supervillain in the DC universe he's sort of become known as is the Trickster.
Oh, yeah.
He's very much more sort of jokey villain kind of thing.
Yeah, and, like, the reason he plays the Trickster on The Flash is because he voiced Joker. Like, that's...
Yes.
Yeah,
and played the Trickster in the original Flash.
Well, yes, yeah, true. Good point. Yeah, but no, I think this, yeah... it is really hard for me to say enough good things about this movie, I feel. Literally, like, my notes is just a whole series of just red caps, like, crazy good score, listen to it, the architecture, red sky! And just that over and over again about all of it, so... Also a couple of really good jokes as well, like, I laughed a lot at the engagement joke at the very beginning. Be careful you don't say the I word, Bruce. The I word? Engagement. Side note as well, but the woman that throws champagne in his face was one of his dates in one of the previous episodes in season 1 of Batman the Animated Series. So
Huh.
continuity, boom, which is cool. This film was released. Obviously, we'll get into all this, but this film was released between season 1 and season 2 of Batman the Animated Series, essentially. So it kind of like works as a stopgap between the two of them. Robin had been introduced at this point, but they also reveal in the novelization that he is away at college at this time, so he is not in this film, which honestly I'm okay with. So
Yeah. It's hard to go all dark, moody film noir with a bright red, yellow, and green coloured kid just hanging around.
I mean, the animated series makes it work, but like for this movie specifically, especially considering it is such a personal story for Bruce, like I don't think you need that there. That's fine. Yeah. No, I think one of the things that I felt was so hilariously telling when I was doing a bunch of research on this movie is that they reference Citizen Kane as an inspiration for like the flashback sequence of the movie. I'm like, yeah, so perfect. Citizen Kane, greatest movie of all time. Inspiration. Batman Mask of the Phantasm, greatest Batman movie of all time. Coincidence? I think not. See, this is the thing. I don't actually know if a lot of people herald Mask of the Phantasm as the best Batman movie ever. That's just a thing that I put onto it. But like, I don't know. I really feel this movie doesn't necessarily get its due in a lot of respects. Mostly because The Dark Knight. Like, The Dark Knight is always the go-to for everyone, but I do not think people should sleep on this film, or just the animated series in general, which people don't.
You've put it as the greatest Batman film there, and some people may regard it as that, some people not. Some people may not even regard it as the best animated Batman film to get a theatrical release.
That's who would support The Killing Joke? That animated movie is awful. Oh, okay.
Lego Batman.
Oh yeah, look.
Yeah, no way I'm putting The Killing Joke above.
God,
this.
Okay. That was the first one I went to because that was the first animated Batman film released after this one. But cinematically anyway. Look, I'm not going to diss Lego Batman here at the very least. That one's great, but like it performs a very different function.
No, I'm purely here to try and get some angry comments going. Get the world mad at you for your Batman opinions.
I mean, I've already said Star Wars is dumb on this podcast, so like I feel like I've already at the bottom of a well. Like we can't go any deeper than that, so we might as well just
try me.
Yeah. I don't know, is there anything else specifically you want to talk about Mask of the Phantasm? Because I could literally just pick it to pieces for ages, but we could definitely get into some of the inspiration and context around it if you want.
Yeah, that's probably, what this podcast is based around. We should probably get into that.
Yeah, at one point or another. So, yeah, as I kind of said before, obviously this is the first animated film continuation, first of 3, of Batman the Animated Series. Well, technically 4 if you count Return of the Joker, but that's Batman Beyond. That's technically another series. It was released between Season 1 and Season 2 of Batman the Animated Series. Season 1 has, I think 65 episodes. It's actually quite large because that was the most... You needed 60 plus to get syndication. And the show was a huge hit. It was kind of on the back of Batman 89, Tim Burton's Batman, which obviously just led to this whole wave of Batmania. It was greenlit on that, and then the show became a big success. Many people still kind of heralded it as, as I noted before, one of the best adaptations of Batman outside of the comics. And because it was such a success, they wanted to go for a film, and then 12 months before this movie was to be released, the execs at Warner Brothers said, yeah, we'll theatrically release it. Which, I think is great. Unfortunately, they didn't necessarily support the theatrical release in that this movie was made in 10 to 12 months, which is an incredibly short turnaround for an animated film. They had to go back and they had to change a lot of it to widescreen so to make sure that it was actually could be released in cinemas. Apparently, the advertising push for it was not great. The film was essentially dumped in cinemas. And because of that, it wasn't actually a very big box office hit. Apparently there's an anecdote of Mark Hamill showing up to one of the screenings, and there being 3 people in the audience, and he just invites them all to sit with him for the film, which I think is very cool. But then after that, I've seen this film referred to essentially as a cult hit, and it did very well on home media, and since then it's been kind of intimately tied into Batman the Animated Series and that show's legacy, which I think very much continues today. So what I find interesting about this one at the very least was that the original premise for the film was actually used for a later episode of the show called The Trial, which is once again an incredible premise of basically a lot of Batman's villains putting Batman on trial to try and prove that he is the reason for all of them existing. Yeah, which I think makes for a great episode of the show itself at the very least, but it is quite a maybe a too talky a premise for the film, which is why it was cut eventually. But then after that, they kind of moved into the idea of the Phantasm. This film, even though it is not a specific adaptation of anything from the comics, it draws inspiration from Year 1 and Year 2, the story, the Batman graphic novels. Year 2 especially, like we've kind of touched on Year 1 before, but that has kind of become the definitive version of the Batman origin, very heavily inspired Batman Begins as well. But Year 2 is a little bit of a lesser known one. I haven't actually read Year 2 myself, I will admit. But the villain of Year 2 is a guy called the Reaper, who is dressed in a very similar garb to the Phantasm, going around murdering mob bosses after his wife is killed. He's essentially the Punisher, but like with a Grim Reaper getup. And at that same time, Bruce is dating his daughter, Rachel. And so for this film, the Phantasm is essentially... Right? Oh, Rachel. I've never made that connection before. Rachel! Yeah, so for this film, the Phantasm is essentially a combination of the Reaper and his daughter into one Andrea Beaumont, which is... Look, personally, I've always thought of the Phantasm as an original character, but like that is where some form of inspiration comes from at the very least.
There is also a bit of inspiration in the character of the Phantasm from the comics in the form of Azrael, who was introduced a year before. So both a lot of the sort of thematics around the character, from the idea of being the angel of death, and a lot of the mask motifs and things, and the idea that he's basically kind of the original Red Hood in a way of a Batman hero, but uses just a bunch of weapons and kills a lot of people.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Azrael is at that time just shown up in the Knightfall story arc, which was kind of hitting its stride in the early 90s. And yeah, like he in many ways is kind of the original like dark mirror reflection of Batman, and that he's Batman but he kills. Whoa, and he's just so much edgier, and that's the Phantasm.
And also a holy fanatic as well.
Yeah, well that too. Thank God they didn't adapt that for this movie. I think that might have been a bit much, but yeah, like obviously the Phantasm functions thematically almost exactly the same way that she is a dark reflection for what Batman could be when he like crosses that line, which has become a very, I don't want to say necessarily cliche, but like a very classic Batman arc. Like, I mean, the Red Hood does this later as well. It is a perpetual thing of like, Prometheus is another character that has become like a dark version of Batman as well. Owlman and a lot of the comics and,
Hush.
Films as well. Hush, yeah, absolutely. Like it's very, Batman has a lot of dark reflections basically. And there's a great, especially when talking about Batman's rogues gallery, like all of them are kind of like representative of different aspects of his personality and psyche. Phantasm is no different in that regard. Yeah, but it is like I don't know, I feel like this is still like the perfect template of this is how you do a dark version of Batman properly, but it is also far from the only one. If you're talking about wider Batman mythos.
I'm still waiting for a Bizarro Batman.
Oh!
Which is just the world's dumbest detective.
He'd be like, I don't know, Inspector Clouseau, essentially. Yeah. What's the opposite of an American accent? I was about to say it's French, but it's not French. Is it British? I don't know.
Yeah. Canadian?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
French-Canadian specifically.
The idea of a very dumb Canadian Batman, I'm deeply on board with, though. I'd watch that.
I have connected the dots together. There were no dots. I've connected them.
I've got so much string. Look at my wall of string. Yeah, I can just imagine him in the back cave or something, and there's all this incredible technology and this huge back computer and everything like that, and he's just got a bunch of sticky notes and string all over it. That's a fun image.
The files are in the computer. He just opens up the computer and pulls out like a docket of files.
Yeah,
like it's a filing cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, anyway, what were we talking about? So the Phantasm, is like kind of, I think it's a good way to describe as a conglomerate of the Reaper and Azrael, which is obviously one of the one of the big new characters in the comics when this movie was being made. So yeah, outside of that, like there are a number of like plot elements that it draws from Year 1 and Year 2. Obviously, like with the flashbacks, we see the origins of Batman, of Bruce becoming Batman. You see him in like the hockey mask and like, I need to strike fear into these cowardly and superstitious lot.
Wait. Are you saying he was wearing hockey pads?
I'm not wearing hockey pads. The Dark Knight quotes are just, they write themselves, don't they? I mean, if you want to do a callback to the first episode, this is the way we do it. We just quote the Dark Knight the entire time. Yeah, so then obviously there's a little bit of that. You could even say it draws a little bit from the overarching plot in Batman Year 2 as well. Even though there's a lot of different elements, like Batman has to team up with Joe Chill, the person who murdered his parents, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in Year 2 that it kind of strips away, thank God. But like the general premise of there is someone new on the scene murdering crime bosses, and Bruce gotta figure out who doing the deed is like, largely the same essentially.
And the sort of father-daughter connection of the love interest, and the father is connected to the mobs, and he could be the bad guy.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, like, as a vague attempt of a misdirect, the voice of Andrea's father also voices the Phantasm, and, like, the build of the Phantasm was specifically made to look like it could be him, essentially, so...
I do find it kind of odd, in a way, just the fact that, like, this is, again, another detective-ish story for Batman, but it's one where he isn't the first one to work it out.
Yeah, I know. The Joker figures it out instantly.
Yeah.
Which is just...
I mean, he has the added advantage of being the one who did the initial killing.
Well, yeah, sure. Like, I mean, he can immediately eliminate quite literally one suspect there, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, very true. I did enjoy that a lot, especially when he calls Batman Toots and stuff. I'm like, I remember watching that for the first time. I'm like, oh man, he's really into Batman. But no, he thinks he's talking to the Phantasm, Andrea. So the Phantasm.
But let's be honest, Joker probably is that into Batman as well.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, yep, deeply, madly in love in all the usual tropes. Yeah, what I do find interesting, as much as like. A lot of characters from Batman the Animated Series, original characters, have been like inducted into Batman lore. Obviously, the biggest example being Harley Quinn, but there's been a lot of minor villains too. But the Phantasm has not had much of a history post this film.
Until now.
Well, yes, I was about to say until recently. She is beginning to show up in the comics now, and she has shown up in Batman Beyond 2.0, the comic, and an episode of Justice League Unlimited, where she was going to murder Terry, who is Batman Beyond or Batman of the Future's parents, which I do really like that detail a lot, because it essentially suggests that after Andrea, basically finds vengeance and then goes off, she just becomes like a sad, like hired gun or like hired killer essentially, which I think is just like a really good like kind of button, I guess, necessarily on her arc, I think, in a really nice way. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of surprised that the Phantasm and Andrea specifically has not had a bit of a more of a recurring thing. Like, I feel like there's a lot of great potential, but I mean, as I kind of alluded to before, the role of the Phantasm has been filled in by many, many other characters as well. So,
but it will be interesting, and it's quite fortuitous that we're recording this now, given that December 1st, the return of the Phantasm for the first time in the comics.
Yeah.
As written by Tom King.
Yep, which is quite cool. So I am quite excited for that, but I'm also very surprised that it took 16 years. So, yep. But I mean, the fact that it's a big deal and people are talking about, bringing her back, I think speaks to the legacy of this movie, which I think is fantastic. So, I don't know, is there anything else specifically you want to talk about regarding adaptation? I feel like it's not worth covering all the minor details, I guess, at the very least.
No, I think we've covered the main plot. We mainly wanted to talk about Year 1 and Year 2, and we've done that.
Honestly, I'm really happy with it only just taking light inspiration and being a largely original story. Like, when I saw this for the first time, I basically approached it as a completely original Batman story outside of the way that it adapts Year 1. And I just think it works. Like, I think it just does a really, really fantastic job of it. Like, especially, there's a couple of moments, honestly, from their version of Batman's origin that I also kind of wish just become staples of wider Batman mythos in a way that I don't feel like they have. That scene at the tombstone when he's begging his parents for a happy life, I think is amazing. And the moment, which I think is the centerpiece of the entire film, when Batman puts on the cowl for the first time and like Alfred reels in horror, I think is just incredible. Like, I marked down what someone said about, let me see, so like, here we go. When Bruce puts on the mask for the first time after Andrea breaks her engagement, and Alfred says, my God, he's reacting in horror because he's watching this man he's helped raise from childhood, this man who has let the desire for vengeance and retribution consume his life, at last embrace the unspeakable. And I think that moment just... my favorite interpretation in many ways is that, like, the mantle of Batman is inherently a curse, essentially. It is a manifestation of his childhood trauma that he cannot get away from. And the way Batman ultimately succeeds is by stopping being Batman. And I think that moment epitomizes so much about that in so little words. I think is just incredible.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I always love it when a series alludes to but ends up going in its own direction for like a fully established origin kind of thing. All those little details, like the fact that, you know, you have the classic bat flying into the window scene, but in this particular scene Batman's just distracted and misses it. What is formerly his main inspiration for the Batman suit, before the later retconning of the getting scared by cave bats. He misses it, and then it comes up later as the bats leaving during this other very fortuitous and monumental moment in his life. And that basically changes the entire sort of crux of that. It no longer becomes about striking fear as much as striking surprise in a way.
Striking surprise.
Well, he gets the inspiration from the bat not because he's scared of the bat, but because it came out in this moment of calm, of this bliss for him as he's proposing, and then bats!
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if in many ways it is not only like kind of a manifestation, it is not only a manifestation of his parents, obviously, but also like the death of his promise of like just a happy life, essentially. Like, you know, the whole thing of getting married with Andrea and all that jazz is like essentially immediately disrupted, and then the image of that disruption is what he carries for the rest of his life. I think it's just like great and just so thematically good. Spicy. Mwah, love it. Yeah, and yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, it adapts year one and the intention of that story so well to this version of the origin. When you tie in Andrea as a pivotal character, I think is fantastic. So, I mean, like, truth be told, I've never been a big fan of Batman love stories. Just generally as a rule, like, I've never really cared for him as, like, and Catwoman as a couple. Same with Talia al Ghul and such. Yeah, I don't know if that's that controversial. I'm not sure, but, like...
Nah, not really.
I don't know. I've never find Batman stories when he's romantically interested in someone, particularly if it's like some woman who's like bad but might be good, like the kind of classic femme fatale, I feel, is just not that incredibly interesting, with one exception, and this is that exception. Like, I think Andrea just works really well in that regard, just as essentially as a mirror to Bruce in so many ways, and I think they really pay it off. So, like, this movie does the impossible, and it makes me care about a Batman romance, which I think is kind of rare and wild, even if it is, like, super generic and heteronormative, when it's like, oh, my chance for a happy life is to marry this pretty woman, but he's definitely an old-fashioned guy, so...
Gotham itself is incredibly old-fashioned.
Well, yeah, exactly. It perpetually exists in, like, some decaying mid-1900s hellscape, so... What do you expect?
Even the major crime mob bosses still look like they've come out of Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. And all the cars and everything, like... This is the thing, the animated series, the aesthetic of Gotham and everything, especially in this, the opening of this, like with the choir swelling and it pans over Gotham and everything, I'm like, yes, this is it. This is, I love it. I love it so much. I gotta stop.
It certainly helps that their big Gotham world of tomorrow is kind of just our world, but 10 years in the future. Like, they're going super far in the future and everyone's just like, I mean, we've got a lot of that now. Yeah,
well, I mean, outside of the robot maids, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I love that spoof of the World's Fair as well, because that is so... Yes. If you want to talk about era, like, I kind of affiliate the World's Fair with, like, kind of an optimistic 20s pre-World War II of, like, this... Look at this bountiful technology that, like, might imbue, like, you know, parts of the future. And, like, Captain America the First Avenger, I think, plays off that quite well as well. And this does a really good job of that, too. And it's like, look at this optimistic, what this future might be. And then you cut, like, you know, 5, 10, you know, how many years down the line, essentially. And it's just this decaying wreckage. And I'm like, oh, once again, thematically spicy. Mwah! Love it.
Yes. But I mean, what do you expect from Gotham? Anytime anyone tries to put any sort of, like, entertainment complex in anywhere, of course it's going to go out of business, become run down and empty and taken over by a supervillain.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, like, recreational activities in Gotham is going outside and getting mugged by a gang. That's what you do for fun in Gotham. Like, literally, just after that, they leave. I don't remember if it's the World's Fair or another one, but they just walk out the front of a place and there's just a guy being beaten up by, like, a gang of bikers in the middle of the day. And I'm like, this is when Gotham is like, being, like, depicted as cheerful and potentially optimistic. And I'm like, oh boy. Oh boy.
And
yeah.
these were, like, the most modern muggers in Gotham, and they were 1950s greasers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Like, it is both like timeless and timely at the same time, which is like, and I love the depiction of Gotham and just Batman mythos in general as kind of existing in this like alter world, like kind of exempt from all of that. Like, I don't know if Batman works as well in the modern day as he does in this kind of period and setting. And I love it.
It does remind me of the classic joke, which I absolutely love because it puts everything into a great context. It's from Text from Superheroes, where Batman basically just says, oh yeah, we gave up daylight savings time and we just set all the clocks 4 hours ahead. And that's why everything is perpetually dark.
Yep, exactly. I just assumed that there was just an eclipse happening in Gotham every other day or something like that. Or I don't know, like there's so much smog that it just perpetually blocks out the sun. Or like something even more metaphorical, where it's like the sins of humanity are like obscuring the sky, and that's why the sky is red from the blood of the innocent, or something like that.
Or probably
It's always
more
kinda
likely
Cthulhu-esque.
what happens with any time anything looks kind of weird and time displaced in the DC universe. The Flash did it. He broke something.
Blame the Flash. The Flash is the reason that Gotham's perpetually being reset to the 50s. It's like, God damn it, Barry, you broke the timeline again. We almost got into the swinging 60s. That's funny.
Yeah. I just love the idea that the Flash got really into Bye Bye Birdie one time. And that's what caused...
I want it to be like this forever. Screw saving my mum. This song is the only thing I care about. And everyone else is going to suffer the consequences of time booms or whatever. Yeah, that's really funny. This is a side note as well. Like, I love how... I mean, Batman the Animated Series perpetually does a fantastic job of being very adult for, like, a children-friendly show. Like, people get murdered and wiped from existence in that show a lot. But I also loved all of the innuendos that Joker just keeps having in this movie. Like, he literally refers to Joker at some point of the spawn of his loins, which is like, I don't know. And then when the Phantasm shows up at the fair, and he's like, you get on the moon, and company shows up. Just stuff like that. I don't know. I really like it.
Even Alfred was getting in with the swing of things.
Yep.
With his snarky comments, and just that one shot of him coming out with lemonade to find Bruce and Andrea rolling around on the glass, and it's just, okay, I'm out.
Yep, I don't want to see where this is going. I mean,
Yep.
Alfred has always been like the masterclass of sass. Like, let's be real. Like, that's what he was a secret agent in. Sarcasm.
Yeah.
It's how it's where he trained. Yeah, no, Alfred's fantastic. Yeah, I dive in your bottom. I bloody well ought to, sir. And then just Batman responds lamely, well, you're wrong, and then storms off. It was so childish. I love it. I feel like I could just keep talking about scenes in this movie forever.
So basically, what you're saying is you wouldn't really do anything differently?
Very good. That wasn't a setup, but I'll take it. But also the answer is yes, I wouldn't do anything differently. Anyway. Jingle.
Jingle, jingle, jingle.
There we go. Very good. I'm just gonna go first because, like, I don't know what I would do differently. Honestly, I was racking my brain this entire time, and there might be a few minor things I change and stuff like that. But I think the movie is so because it's only like a little over 70 minutes long as well. Like, it's so incredibly concise too. I think, and like theoretically, like you could kind of like buff it up and add like more subplots and characters and stuff, but I really just like how streamlined it is. So honestly, might do it differently is just change the song during the end credits because I don't think it fits. Yeah, I just think it was like too upbeat. I want to hear like more of the choir or something like that. Like, literally, that was my only thought while I was watching it. I was like, yeah, I don't really like this song. I just like, I don't know. Put in something more dour, or like the Prince song from Batman '89. No, don't do that. That would fit even worse. But yeah, I don't know. Outside of that, like this, I found this one a really, really difficult one to do. So like, I mean, theoretically, like you could completely radically change the film and then do it entirely differently. But like, I don't really want to. Like, I think this movie just works fantastic the way it is. That's mine, I guess. Which isn't a do it differently. Just don't do it differently at all.
I kind of feel a little in the same way as in like there's a lot of this it works, and I like because I haven't seen the animated series, I didn't know how it all like fits in as well.
Yeah.
I did have a few more thoughts on what I would sort of change. Like one of my thoughts was instead of going for the Joker, maybe go somewhere like Black Mask.
Oh, you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the sense that it would fit a lot better in the actual like literal sense. Maybe not so much thematically, but the idea of the mob bosses all getting together, someone working their way up from like his own little origin story to match Bruce's kind of
Yeah, sure. I could say that at the very least. I feel like Black Mask is a character that has a lot of potential in like a lot of Batman stories, but he's very rarely given his due. Like I always think of the twist in Arkham Origins where you think Black Mask is the main villain, but no, it just turns out it's Joker all along.
Oh, of course.
Which is a shame. So yeah, I think that would actually that would fit better, I guess, than trying to like fit Joker into the plot at the last minute.
Yeah, so that was my main thought. But I did have one little thought, and hear me out. Bruce Wayne buys a newspaper company.
What?
And then we just do Casablanca again.
Oh.
No, not Casablanca, sorry.
Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
I'm confusing up my classic films.
Yeah, I mean, like, no, legitimately, though, I was thinking about this for the parallels for Citizen Kane, but if he married Andrea, it could just become Citizen Kane. Like, he just becomes a really wealthy media mogul, his marriage falls apart, and he just becomes a recluse in his manner, and then, but instead of, like, Rosebud, instead of thinking of his, what's his name, the snow globe
Sled.
at the end, yeah, the sled, sorry. Instead of thinking of his sled at the end, he just thinks
Batman.
No, he just thinks like bats or something at the last minute. Or the cave. Or I'm sorry, parents, or something like that. Yeah. No, uncanny. Like well, I mean, like Citizen Kane's like origins, like childhood origins is very different. But like outside of that, very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Great.
Citizen Bats.
Citizen Bats. I would do that.
Yes.
Imagine remaking Citizen Kane but turning it into a Batman movie. People would hate it. God, imagine the blowback. But I would watch that so hard.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Going off my mistake earlier, a Casablanca, but with Batman and Catwoman.
Yeah, sure.
And there you get another romantic plot you can get invested in, but doesn't affect it, because in the end, Catwoman goes off to live with
Kite Man.
someone.
Hell yeah. I don't know. He was the first name that came to my mind.
See, my thought was Calendar Man, but
that works pretty well too. I mean, he'd never forget her birthday.
that's how I want to do it differently.
Oh yeah.
Batman the Animated Series, Calendar Man origin, full-length movie. Give me my Calendar Man origin movie.
Yep. No, look, fair. I would. He's a legitimately creepy character in a lot of things. Long Halloween. Oh boy, and really
Batman
unpleasant.
the Brave and the Bold.
Yeah. Well, terrible. Calendar King. He is in that.
Yes.
For a moment, that's a great episode. Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I mean, like you think about it though, like Gotham is perpetually a city that's essentially being occupied and at war. So like, the parallels are not that far off. And Bruce Wayne can definitely be as jaded as Rick. So,
and just at the end, Batman and Commissioner Gordon walking off. This could be the start of a beautiful friendship.
Hell yeah. Yep. Then they kiss. Which is definitely the implication I've always wanted from Casablanca, but probably not the case. No, awesome. I love both of those.
Chances are you'll wind up in a Joker laughing gas chamber.
Ugh.
Instead of a concentration.
Yeah, no, I know, but like, ugh. I don't know.
Things got weird now.
Yeah, that hit a little bit too real. Anyway, let's move on from that so we don't have to dwell on that comment. What have you got to recommend us this episode, Ev?
Well, we talked about mine already, and look, I've probably mentioned it before in probably the first episode, but Knightfall.
Oh, great.
The Batman comic.
Love Knightfall.
Yes, it is. I think it's really good. It's one of the best Bane comics that I've read.
I mean, it is
not
the
just 'cause
Bane
it's-
comic, like the original,
Yes.
yeah.
But it gets right what a lot of the other non-comic adaptations seem to get wrong, in the fact that Bane is again another dark version of Bruce Wayne, but the fact that he's a really different origin story still works really well, and he's still super smart. He just uses it for his own crusade, which is to basically no longer be bullied.
Yeah. And break the bat.
Yes.
Yep.
Which was, again, his just manifestation of, like, oh, clearly that's another one who's potentially out to get me. I'll get them before they can get me. That's his whole thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's how he survived in Santa Cruz. I believe, wait, is it Santa Cruz?
No, Santa Cruz is an actual place.
No, yeah, I'm mistaken. You know what I mean. The island that he grew up
Yes.
on, essentially.
Yeah.
Yep. Which
I know what you mean.
currently escaping me. That's annoying. But
same
yeah.
here.
No, I would second Knightfall. Nightfall is fantastic. Knightfall is a big story. Like, there are 3 volumes to Knightfall.
Yes.
Personally, I think the first one is my favorite. The one with actual...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Bane, and then Azrael shows up in the second, and then Batman takes in Azrael in the third. But the
They're
whole
all
arc is
good,
great.
but if you're going to read one, read the first. Like,
Yep,
that has to be
absolutely.
the one.
Yep. Cool. I was going to recommend, actually, once again, something Batman related, but the next animated film from Batman, the animated series following this one, which is Batman Subzero. Which, I mean, like, honestly, I would recommend every Mr. Freeze related thing from Batman the Animated Series, because, like, Heart of Ice, which is, like, kind of his redoing of the origin story of Mr. Freeze, is incredible. It turns him into a really fantastic, sympathetic character. And Sub-Zero, in many ways, is just kind of a continuation of that. Like, it is definitely not as strong as Mask of the Phantasm, but still really great. It hits all of the same beats as Batman the Animated Series. And if you really enjoy this, you would definitely enjoy that. Hell, I would recommend almost every Batman the Animated Series and related thing, except for maybe Mystery of the Batwoman. I wasn't as impressed with that one, but outside of that, I think it's all fantastic. So, yeah, no, I love it. It holds a very special place in my heart.
Mr. Freeze is another one of those characters. Although he didn't start in the animated series, that origin and that his whole deal basically comes straight from the animated series, the modern interpretation.
Absolutely, like
of it, and it is
defines
so
the modern day interpretation
Yeah.
of the character. Yeah, incredible. Yep. Until New 52
I haven't
turned
seen
him
it,
in.
even I knew it.
Yeah, sure. Until New 52 turned him into an incel, because that was the thing. So, yeah.
We
Which
don't
look,
talk about that.
well, look, I get it. It's a more of a villainous twist, but like I don't know, it doesn't really sit incredibly well with me. It feels kind of insensitive and gross. But yeah, anyway, that's another thing.
But weirdly, on the plus side, the other main Ice villain, when he got a New 52 reboot in Captain Cold, became even more sympathetic and better character.
Yeah, that's where all of the
So-
sympathy went. It went from
Yeah.
one ice villain to the other ice villain.
Yeah.
He literally sapped it away. Yeah, what is it? Captain Cold.
Whilst becoming a meta-human himself.
Captain Cold is also a fun character, but like
Yes.
Mr. Freeze's, there was actually rumors of it recently while we recorded this episode, but they're talking about doing a Mr. Freeze origin film in the vein of Joker. And that is a Batman villain that deserves his own movie. Like, Joker's, we did a mini shift on Joker, you can listen to that, but like, if you were to do a standalone, I mean, I feel like you could do a standalone movie for a lot of Batman villains, but Mr. Freeze is the one that I would love to see, so, yeah. Yep. Heart of Ice, and mostly Batman Sub-Zero, so, yep. Very good. All right, cool. Thank you to everyone who listened to this episode of Medium Shift. We can be found at mediumshift@gmail.com. Feel free to send in all of your, I don't know, dark parallels of Batman. How are you a dark parallel of Batman? Tell us in 25 words or less.
And if you're dark parallels of Chris and Ev, then
Stay
please
the
away.
hell away from us.
Get away from us.
Yeah, I don't
Just
want to
leave.
deal with you. This is not a comic book. It's not as fun in real life. Yep. Next
I know what's wrong with me. I don't need someone else pointing that out.
Yeah, exactly. We're way too introspective. It's just like, who wants to look in a gross mirror all the time? We can just look in normal mirrors. They're bad enough as is. So. Next episode, yeah, going to be continuing our trip down memory lane by doing an episode in the same universe of Kong Skull Island. Just with this one, a little bit more lizard and frustratingly little Bryan Cranston.
It's Godzilla.
Yep.
Because Kong vs. Godzilla still hasn't come out yet.
No, not yet, sadly. So yeah, Godzilla, the 2014 one that some people love to hate and some people just love. I'm actually really looking forward to rewatching it. I haven't seen it since I saw it in cinemas, so It's been a long time coming. So stick around for that. I cannot wait somehow managing to shoehorn Godzilla versus King Kong in there again. Somewhere. We should really just do that episode on that one. That's really what's crying out for it. But until then, fare thee well.
Rachel!